One morning, Thor McAlpin went into Cowcaddens, a poor district behind the ridge where the art school stood. They sketched in the asphalt play park until small, persistent boys, "What are you writing, mister? Are you writing a photo of that building, mister? Will you write my photo, mister?" drove them up a cobbled street to the canal. They crossed the shallow arch of the wooden bridge and climbed past some warehouses to the top of the threadbare green hill. There they stood under an electric pylon and looked across the city centre. The wind, which stirred the skirts of their coats, was shifting mounds of grey cloud eastward along the valley. Travelling patches of sunlight went from ridge to ridge, making a hump of tenements gleam against the dark towers of the city chambers and silhouetting the cupolas of the Royal Infirmary against the tomb-glittering spine of the necropolis. "Glasgow is a magnificent city," said McAlpin. "Why do we hardly ever notice that?" "Because nobody imagines living here," said Thor. McAlpin lit a cigarette and said, "If you want to explain that, I'll certainly listen. Then think of Florence, Paris, London, New York. Nobody visiting them for the first time is a stranger because he's already visited them in paintings, novels, history books, and films. But if a city hasn't been used by an artist, not even the inhabitants live there imaginatively. What is Glasgow to most of us? A house, a place we work, a football park or a golf club. Some pubs and connecting streets. That's all. No, I'm wrong, actually. There's also the cinema and the library. And when our imagination needs exercise, we use these to visit London, Paris, Rome, under the Caesars, the American West at the turn of the century, anywhere but here and now. Imaginatively, Glasgow exists as a music-hall song and a few bad novels. That's all we've given to the world outside. It's all we've given to ourselves. I thought we'd exported other things, ships and machinery, for instance. Oh yes, we were once the world's foremost makers of several useful things. When this century began, we had the best organised labour force in the United States of Britain. And we had John Maclean, the only Scottish schoolteacher to tell his students what was being done to them. He organised the housewives' strike here on the Clyde side, which made the government stop the landlords getting extra money for the duration of the World War I. That's more than most prime ministers have managed to do. Lenin thought the British Revolution would start in Glasgow. It didn't. During the general strike, a red flag flew over the city chambers there, and a crowd derailed a tramcar. The army sent tanks into George Square, but nobody was hurt much. Nobody was killed except by bad pay, bad housing and bad feeding. Maclean was killed by the bad housing and bad feeding in Barlinnie jail. So in the 1930s, with a quarter of the male workforce unemployed here, the only violent men were Protestant and Catholic gangs who slashed each other with razors. Well, it's easier to fight your neighbours than it is to fight a bad government. And it gave excitement to hopeless lives before World War II started. So Glasgow never got into the history books, except as a statistic. And if it vanished tomorrow, our output of ships and carpets and lavatory pans would be replaced in months by grateful men working overtime in England, Germany and Japan. Of course, our industries still keep nearly half of Scotland living around here. They let us exist. But who, nowadays, is happy just to exist? "I am at the moment," said McAlpin, watching the sunlight move along the rooftops. "So am I," said Thor, wondering what had happened to his argument. After a moment, McAlpin said, "So you paint to give Glasgow a more imaginative life?" "No, that's my excuse. I paint because I feel cheap and purposeless when I don't." "I envy your purpose."